GraceandTruthRadio.world proudly presents Life Coaching for Men, improving their relationships with their wives and learning to communicate for a more fulfilling and satisfying marriage. And now, Men Loving Well, with Christian counselor, author, and relationship coach, Dr. Jim Slaughter.
In the earliest chapters of the Bible, a conflict arises between a husband and a wife that will change the course of cosmic history. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. The serpent seduced the woman and deceived her. Eve took the bait. She believed his lie and ate the fruit. Then she handed some to her husband, who also ate it, and followed her into darkness and death. When the Lord God questioned them about what happened, a conflict arose between the man and his wife. And God said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you've done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." With an accusation, the man blamed his wife. He even implied that really the Lord was to blame for giving him the woman in the first place. She blamed the serpent. But, Adam was there with her, wasn't he? He could have intervened to remind Eve that this fruit was off limits, but he didn't. And his knowing complicity sent the cosmos into a tailspin. A few chapters later, we see another history-changing conflict, the conflict between Abraham and his wife Sarah and their two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. The argument between Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 21, 8-13 is really heated. We read, "The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham had a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, 'Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac.' And so the Egyptian slave woman Hagar and her son Ishmael were sent out into the desert. But God sustained them and eventually made a great nation of people through Ishmael." Conflict is a fact of life and certainly a reality in married life. We may have believed those sugar-coated myths that pictured marriage as a time of total bliss when two people live happily ever after. But most likely the sugar-coating quickly melted away under the heat of real married life. Every marriage includes conflict because marriage is a union of two people who have their own individual viewpoints, their own frames of reference, and their own personal values. People are just different. No two people can agree on everything all the time. Any marriage will have conflict from time to time. The word conflict brings to mind images of warfare and battles, but conflict in marriage has to do with disagreement and emotional tension, resulting from incompatible needs and drives. A wife wants one thing, the husband wants something different. A husband believes one thing, the wife believes something else. So we disagree. We feel emotional stress. This stress can carry with it dark emotions such as shame, anger, and resentment. These emotions are hard to live with, so we may be tempted not to say anything just to keep the peace. But as one man put it, if you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you start a war within yourself. Anger, resentment, even bitterness will tend to make you sick if the conflict isn't addressed. What do you do when you find yourself at cross purposes with your wife? Every married couple needs to know how to handle conflict in a creative, constructive way. A good beginning is to commit to working through the problem and not just ignore it, hoping it will go away. It won't. The ostrich approach to conflict resolution is no resolution at all. It creates distance and hurt feelings. On the other hand, committing to each other to work through hard things can be one of the best ways to say, "I love you." To resolve a conflict, you have to talk about it. Sometimes you'd rather not, but to mend hurt feelings and put away resentment, you've got to communicate. So don't avoid conflict with the silent treatment. Some people use silence to avoid the pain of confrontation. They fear being hurt by what they may hear, so they just clam up. Others opt for the silent treatment in an attempt to control, frustrate, or manipulate their spouse. Maybe in the past that spouse hasn't been ready to listen. But in the long run, silence never pays off. Don't go silent because you're afraid to deal with the issue. Many of the couples who come to me for help involve a silent husband. Men often tend to avoid conflict in discussions, so we choose small talk, office talk, or whatever helps keep us off the subject. Realize, however, that talking with your wife through a disagreement is actually a way of loving her well. When you come together to deal with your conflict, don't let anger sabotage the process. Deal with anger before you work through conflict, or you're likely to make things worse and accomplish nothing. Anger is a natural emotion, and we all feel it at times. But when we don't do something to get rid of it, it becomes the devil's tool, and we hurt people with it. Anger isn't sin, but it leads to sin if we leave it inside us and let it work. The Apostle Paul teaches in Ephesians 4:26, "In your anger do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." You can't resolve conflict with your wife as long as anger creates conflict of its own inside you. So get rid of it before the end of the day. Then talk. You'll be a kinder, gentler husband and leader. The Apostle's words also warn us not to wait too long to resolve a conflict. If we wait, problems can fester inside, leading to bitterness. Storing little hurts up inside and not dealing with them immediately can cause even simple problems to become almost impossible to handle due to resentment that has increased over time. By confronting and resolving problems as they arise, you won't store ammunition that can cause an explosion later on. Matthew urges us to settle differences quickly, that if someone has something against us, it's better if we go and reconcile our differences even before we offer a gift to God at the altar. Matthew 5:24 and 25. If it's your wife who's angry, saying, "Now don't get mad," will just make things worse. Try saying something like this instead. "I'm sorry. Something's making you angry. If it's me, I apologize. What can I do to help?" This approach can work just about anywhere, anytime. Work as a team, attacking the problem, not each other. Keep your discussion as impersonal as possible. Avoid hateful remarks, innuendos, and sarcasm. Complaints over 6 months old aren't permissible, so remember to forget. No references to your wife's appearance or to relatives, to in-laws. Never attack the other person's character. No manipulation through emotion, tears, or threats. Here's a kind of humorous example that demonstrates the point. She says, "I've got nothing to do all day. I put in 3 times the hours you do." He says, "Doing what? I remember when we used to have real meals, not TV dinners." She says, "You agreed on TV dinners when I took the part-time job. You're as unreasonable as your mother. I suppose you've told her about the TV dinners, too. Well, he says, she asked me how come you were putting on all that weight, and I told her it couldn't be our dinners. TV trays don't hold enough to feed a cat. She says, you don't love me. All you want is a housekeeper who cooks like your mother. You're cruel. Boo-hoo. You're cruel. Tears, tears. So we use wholesome words that build up, not unwholesome words that tear down. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may be beneficial for those who listen. Ephesians 4:29. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. A man of knowledge uses words with restraint, and a man of understanding is even-tempered. Proverbs 17:27. And make sure you avoid these 6 conflict resolution killers. They are the product of distorted thinking that will derail almost any attempt to resolve conflict in your marriage. Distortion number 1 is blaming, assigning fault to the other person without considering fault of our own, or perhaps that no one's at fault. A scenario would sound like this. Why does everything have to look perfect to you? You're making us late for the movie, and you know the first 5 minutes is the most important part. This whole thing is your fault. That's blaming. Distortion number 2, assuming. Assuming is mind reading, jumping to conclusions, single explanations, deciding what's true before having all the facts. Here's a scenario. She's late for lunch. I've really been looking forward to this, but it doesn't seem to matter to her. Maybe I don't really matter to her. Obviously, something's more important to her than me. That's assuming. None of those things probably is true. Distortion number 3 is magnifying. Magnifying is exaggerating, making things out to be worse than they really are. Some people call this catastrophizing. Here's a scenario. The house payment was due yesterday. How can you possibly forget that? This is going to get us in big trouble with the mortgage company. Our credit score will fall off the chart. We're going to lose our house. We'll end up having to file bankruptcy. This is magnifying. Distortion number 4 is global labeling. Global labeling is name-calling. It's pinning a negative identity label on someone. It might sound like this. I can't believe the neighbor's kid's ball is in my yard again, and I'm sure they expect me just to throw it back over the fence. They're such jerks. They're mindless and irresponsible. If they were a bad neighbor club, they would be charter members. Global labeling. Distortion number 5 is overgeneralizing. This is using broad, absolute terms, like always and never, to describe someone. It might sound like this. You are without doubt the worst driver I have ever seen. You always drive over the speed limit. You never come to a full stop at stop signs, and you always weave in and out of traffic. It's like you can never get where you're going fast enough, like you're always on your way to a fire or something. This is overgeneralizing. Distortion number 6 is demanding, commanding. Demanding, commanding. This is believing my way is the only right way, when there may be neither a right nor a wrong way, but simply a preference. The scenario might sound something like this. Why on earth did you use that exit from the parking lot? We would have gotten home much quicker if you'd used the other exit. The other one makes much more sense. This is being demanding and commanding. Resorting to any of these anger killers, these distortions, which you may have done sometime in the past, never helps resolve conflict. In fact, it produces conflict and drives the two of you further away from each other. Here's something it is important to use when working through a tough issue. Use active listening. Use active listening. Make eye contact with your wife and don't interrupt. You show disrespect by interrupting or talking over the other person. Let her finish, then take your turn. Remember the admonition of James. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. James 1:19. Often we try so hard to make our own point, we don't hear the other person's point of view. We're too busy thinking about what we're going to say next. Ask questions to make sure you understand what she means. Listen with your whole body. Show her that every word she says is of the highest importance to you. Go at it as if you're working together to solve a puzzle. Some couples act like linemen squaring off against each other on opposite sides of the line of scrimmage. Remember, you're on the same team. If you believe you just have to win the argument and have your own way, then you're going to lose. The other person's going to be mad, resentful, and they're not going to cooperate. Both of you win when you work on the problem together. As you discuss the pluses and minuses of possible solutions, perhaps one person's idea appears to have more merit, so you both decide that's a good solution to the problem. Or maybe something in between. Compromise is a better solution. Each of you gives something then, and each of you gets something back. But both of you can be satisfied that you've worked together to make a good decision. One last thing needs to be said about resolving conflict in marriage. We must handle disagreements with humility. You may not want to admit it, but you just could be wrong. Proverbs 22:4 tells us, "Humility and the fear of the Lord bring wealth and honor and life." On the other hand, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. 11:2. A lot of people find this sentence difficult, if not impossible, to say. I'm wrong. You're right. Practice saying it. Practice saying it. I'm wrong. You're right. And use it when you should in a disagreement or a discussion. When you honestly own up to knowing you're wrong and your wife is right, you improve communication 1,000-fold and you deepen your relationship with her. There are times when asking for forgiveness is the appropriate thing to do. I think there may be no more healing words than, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me. Remember Proverbs 28:13? He who conceals his sins does not prosper, but whoever confesses and renounces them finds mercy. If your wife confesses faults or admits mistakes, tell her you forgive her. Even if you were right, forgive her and forget about it. Colossians 3:13 tells us we should be gentle and ready to forgive, never holding grudges. Ogden Nash, a humorist and one of my favorite poets, offers this final bit of advice to husbands. We'll all do well to follow it. To keep your marriage brimming with love in the loving cup, when you're wrong, admit it. When you're right, shut up. So guys, when it comes to resolving conflict between you and your wife, here's some things to remember. Number one, conflict is a normal part of every marriage, including yours. Number two, commit to working through the problem with your wife. Don't ignore it, hoping it'll go away. It won't. Number three, don't use the silent treatment to resolve conflict. You've got to talk about it. Number four, put away your own anger. Number five, resolve conflict as quickly as possible. Number six, work as a team to attack the problem, not each other. Number seven, avoid hurtful language and references. Things like hateful remarks, innuendos, sarcasm, character attacks, remarks about appearance or relatives, manipulation through emotion or threats. Those have no place. Number eight, use wholesome words that build up, not words that tear down. Number nine, avoid distorted thinking. No blaming, no assuming, no magnifying, not any global labeling, no overgeneralizing or demanding or commanding thinking or behavior. Number 10, listen actively. 11, compromise when necessary. And number 12, have an attitude of humility and be willing to forgive. That's our show for today. Go and be a really good husband and love well.
Thank you again for joining us. Men Loving Well airs live every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time on graceandtruthradio.world. If you would like to contact or coach with Dr. Jim Slaughter, reach out to him on Facebook.com, Living Well Show. Email him at jslaughterphd@yahoo.com or contact him at his clinic, Life Solutions, 817-232-1363. We look forward to seeing you again next week here on Men Loving Well.
Life Solutions Coaching and Counseling in Fort Worth, Texas is a full-service wellness clinic providing individual, group, and family counseling, one-on-one coaching for life and wellness, and naturopathic treatments of medical massage therapy combined with essential oils to ensure you reach your health and wellness goals. Sessions are available in person or by phone. Get started on your new life today. Just call 817-232-1363 or go to lifesolutionscoachingandcounseling.com or email them at lifesolutionscc@yahoo.com.